Louisiana is known for its rich culture and haunting beauty, but beneath the surface lies a deeper story, one of ancient civilizations, forgotten tribes, and unexplained structures. From mysterious mounds to vanished villages, these lesser-known mysteries challenge what we think we know about the region's past and hint at secrets still buried in the bayou. Poverty Point Earthworks. Poverty Point Earthworks. If you ever find yourself standing on the wide ridges of Poverty Point, you'll know pretty quickly you're not on just any stretch of land. You're standing on something ancient and honestly a little baffling. This place isn't just a bunch of old dirt mounds. It's something far more intentional, massive, complex, and built over 3,000 years ago, long before the Roman Empire, long before the pyramids of Giza were even finished. Located in northeastern Louisiana, near the quiet little town of EPS, Poverty Point covers nearly 900 acres. It's made up of large mounds, sweeping concentric ridges, and big, open plazas. You wouldn't expect this out here in the middle of what looks like ordinary farmland, and yet it's one of the most puzzling archaeological sites in North America. Now here's the strange part. The people who built this weren't farmers. They weren't living in cities or growing crops in tidy rows. According to everything we know about this period, they were hunter-gatherers. They moved from place to place, hunting animals and gathering wild food. And still, they somehow managed to pull off an engineering project that would challenge even modern construction crews. No machines, no metal tools, no wheels, just baskets and people. Start with the design. The ridges at Poverty Point are arranged in 6 giant C-shaped arcs, kind of like ripples spreading out on a pond. Inside that pattern is a huge central plaza, about 40 acres in size. And standing off to the side is the most jaw-dropping part, Mound A. It's often called the Bird Mound. Because of its shape, some say it looks like a bird in flight. This mound alone contains over 238,000 cubm of earth, all of it moved by hand, one basket at a time. And the craziest thing, archaeologists think it might have been built in just a few months, not years, months. This doesn't match the usual story we tell about early cultures. How could people who didn't have permanent homes organize something this massive? How do you get hundreds, maybe thousands of people to work together without a central government or written language or any real technology? That's one of the big questions researchers still don't have an answer for. What kind of social system could pull this off? Was there a chief giving orders? Or was it more like a shared belief that motivated people to work together? Maybe it was spiritual. Maybe it was something else entirely. We just don't know. And then there's the question of why here. This spot isn't near any major river system. It doesn't sit on especially fertile land. It's quiet, rural, and kind of out of the way. So, why choose this location? Many archaeologists believe the placement wasn't random. Some parts of the site seem to line up with the sun's position during solstices. That suggests the builders were watching the sky. They were keeping track of time, of seasons, maybe even building a kind of giant calendar in the earth. But it gets even weirder when you look at what they left behind. Thousands of artifacts have been uncovered at Poverty Point. Stone tools, beads, clay figurines, and strange objects called cooking bowls, which were probably used to heat up food. But what's most surprising is where the materials came from. The raw stones used in these tools weren't local. Some came from the Appalachian Mountains, some from Missouri, others from the Gulf Coast, or as far as Arkansas. Think about what that means. A group of people supposedly nomadic and without agriculture was somehow involved in a massive trade network stretching across what's now the eastern half of the US. That's not just impressive, it's mind-blowing. These weren't isolated bands of people. They were connected. They had knowledge of geography, trade routes, and relationships with distant groups. That changes the picture completely. Poverty Point wasn't just a temporary camp. It may have been a gathering place, a spiritual center, a hub of trade, ceremony, or even leadership for a much larger region. This might have been the place people came to exchange goods, share stories, conduct rituals, or maybe even learn. But despite everything we've uncovered, we're still left with more questions than answers. How long was it used? Most evidence points to activity between 1700 and 1100 CEE. But then at some point it was abandoned, and we don't know why. There are no signs of war, no fire, no destruction, just a slow fade into silence. One theory is climate change. Maybe the environment shifted and large gatherings became harder to support. Another theory is cultural change. Maybe newer generations simply moved on, carrying different beliefs, different priorities. Today, Poverty Point is a protected historic site. It's peaceful, sometimes eerily so. If you visit on a quiet morning when the fog rolls low across the mounds, you'll probably be one of only a few people there. The silence is almost heavy. You can walk the ridges, climb Mound Day, and look out across the same land that thousands once stood on, celebrating, trading, or maybe praying. Some locals talk about it with a quiet pride. It's not flashy, not crowded, and not always well known outside Louisiana, but it's special. It tells a different story about ancient America, one where complexity, creativity, and community existed without the things we normally think are necessary for civilization. And that's the real heart of the mystery. Poverty Point doesn't fit the mold. It wasn't built by farmers or by people living in cities. It was built by people who lived off the land, who hunted, who gathered, and who somehow built one of the largest and most mysterious complexes in ancient North America. There's no writing, no monuments with names, no temples or tombs, just earth moved with unbelievable effort, aligned with the stars, surrounded by objects from hundreds of miles away. It forces us to rethink what we think we know, to ask whether civilization has to follow a specific path or whether there are other ways humans have chosen to come together, build and believe. Whoever these people were, they left behind more than just mounds. They left behind a message, one we still don't fully understand, one that echoes in the silence of the ridges and the shadow of the bird mound. A message about connection, about purpose, and maybe about something sacred. Poverty Point is more than a mystery. It's a challenge, a reminder that history is full of stories we've barely begun to uncover, and that sometimes the most incredible chapters are written in dirt, not stone. The Lost Tribe of the Ouachita Mountains. The Lost Tribe of the Ouachita Mountains. Tucked deep in the misty highlands of western Louisiana, brushing right up against the Arkansas border, lies the Ouachita Mountain region. It's peaceful, rugged, beautiful, in that quiet, undisturbed kind of way. But beneath the calm, this land holds a whisper, an old story that refuses to fade, a mystery passed down through generations. Some call it folklore, others believe it's something more. It's the legend of a people who might have lived here long before any European ever set foot on American soil. A mysterious group known as the Lost Tribe of the Ouachitas. Now, the idea of a lost tribe might sound like something straight out of a campfire tale. But this story shows up in unexpected places, from old explorer journals to tribal oral traditions. The descriptions are strange and specific. A group with light skin, red or blonde hair, odd customs, and a tendency to keep to themselves. They didn't blend in. They didn't fight with the local tribes. They were just different. One reason this story has stuck around for so long is the region itself. The Ouachtas were never heavily developed. There weren't massive cities or busy trade routes cutting through. That isolation gave local legends space to breathe and time to take root. When French explorers came through the area in the 1700s, some of the native tribes they spoke with mentioned a curious people deep in the mountains. Not enemies, not relatives, just strangers. outsiders who lived in caves, built stone structures, and didn't seem to fit the mold. That's where things get interesting. Over the years, settlers, hunters, and explorers started running into strange things out in those hills. Stone-lined tombs, unusual rock formations, skeletal remains that didn't match the known burial practices of the area. Some said the bones were taller than average. Some claimed the skulls looked off somehow elongated maybe, but here's the problem. None of it was officially studied. Most of it wasn't documented. Bones were taken, artifacts went missing, and as time passed, those early finds turned into half-memories and second-hand stories. Even so, a pattern began to form, too many odd reports to brush off. Completely. They weren't always dramatic. Sometimes it was just a hiker stumbling across a low stone wall in the woods, too well placed to be natural. Other times, it was a local mentioning carvings in a cave that no one could explain, and all of it fed the legend. The idea that someone had been there, someone outside the known history books. Some folks tried to tie it into bigger theories. The most well-known is probably the tale of Prince Madoc, a Welsh explorer who supposedly sailed to North America in the 12th century, centuries before Columbus, and vanished inland. A few theorists suggest his group might have ended up in the Ouachitas, blending with or becoming something entirely new. Others have tossed out even wilder possibilities: Norse explorers, Phoenicians, even remnants of the mysterious sea peoples from the ancient Mediterranean. But those are at best long shots. There's no real evidence linking the Ouachita to ancient Europe. No shipwrecks, no confirmed inscriptions, just vague similarities and wishful thinking. Still, the pull of the unknown is strong. People want to believe there's also a more grounded theory, one that doesn't require far-off explorers. Maybe this so-called lost tribe was just an isolated indigenous group, one that didn't leave behind much and didn't fit neatly into what we know about the Caddo Chacao or other tribes in the region. The Southeast was home to hundreds of smaller groups with unique languages, beliefs, and customs. Disease, colonization, and war wiped many of them out before their stories could be recorded. It's entirely possible that one of those cultures survived a little longer in the remote folds of the Ouachita, long enough to be remembered, just vaguely enough to become a legend. But that still doesn't explain the weirdest part: the structures. Some of the earliest reports described low stone terraces built along the slopes of the mountains. These weren't random rock piles. They looked intentional, like someone had once shaped the hills into something useful. Maybe for farming, maybe for shelter. Whatever the purpose, it didn't match what we know about local indigenous architecture. The Southeast wasn't known for stone building. Wood, yes. Earth, definitely. But stone, that was rare. Still, people continue to search. Every few years, a hiker or amateur researcher stumbles on something odd. A rock alignment that seems too straight, or a cluster of mounds tucked deep in the forest, far from any known site. Locals sometimes talk about burial circles hidden off trail. Low, round mounds that don't match the more famous native sites in the area. What keeps this legend alive isn't just what was said, it's what still might be out there. The Ouachita are remote, thick with forest, hard to access in many places, and not as heavily studied as other parts of the state. It's the kind of place where secrets could absolutely stay buried. If there was an isolated group living here once, building with stone, hiding in caves, it's possible we haven't found everything they left behind. And maybe we never will. Maybe they were just a small, forgotten branch of a known tribe. Maybe they were something else entirely. But either way, the mystery touches something deep. It's not about proving a theory. It's about wondering. Wondering what's been lost. Wondering who walked these trails before us. Wondering if the land remembers what people have forgotten. Today, the Ouachitas draw mostly campers and bird watchers. You can hike for hours without seeing another person. The wind moves through the pines. Creeks run cold through the valleys. Everything feels untouched, but if you know what to look for, Stone rows under the moss, faint terraces cut into the hillside, or strange markings inside shallow caves. You might start to wonder too. You might ask yourself, who lived here before the names and dates? Who built things that don't match the record? And why did they disappear so quietly? Maybe the truth is still out there, hidden beneath the leaves and lichen. Or maybe the mystery itself is what they left behind, a story wrapped in silence meant to keep us looking. And so the lost tribe of the UAS remains just that. Lost, but not forgotten. The ghost city of Frenier. The ghost city of Frenier, not far from the edge of Lake Pontchartrain, tucked between the cypress trees and tangled swampland west of New Orleans, there used to be a quiet little town called Frenier. Today, you'd never know it was there. The woods have taken it back. The water covers most of what's left, but if you ask around, maybe talk to an old fisherman or one of the swamp guides, they'll tell you that Frenier didn't just vanish. It was taken. To understand the story, you've got to go back more than 100 years. Back then, Frenier wasn't much, just a small settlement perched along the railroad tracks. It had a post office, a depot, and a few dozen homes built near the edge of the swamp. Most people grew cabbage, worked the rail line, or harvested cypress lumber. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a place where people lived, worked, and raised families. It had its own rhythm. And then came Julia Brown. Julia lived right on the edge of town, where the land melts into marsh. She was known as a healer. Some say she practiced voodoo. Others say she was just deeply spiritual. Either way, people came to her for help. Herbal remedies, prayers, blessings. She wasn't exactly warm, but she had a reputation for being powerful, respected, and feared. Over time, folks started depending on her too much. They came with their problems, asking for help again and again, but they didn't always show gratitude. Some say Julia felt used, like the whole town leaned on her, but didn't really care about her. And according to legend, she grew bitter. Then came the warning. "One day I'm going to die," she supposedly said, "and I'm going to take the whole town with me." At first, people brushed it off. Maybe she was angry, maybe it was just talk. But that one sentence stuck around, and everything that happened next made it hard to forget. Julia Brown died on September 28th, 1915. The town planned her funeral for the next day. People gathered, family, friends, neighbors, all coming to pay their respects. That same day, without much warning, a massive hurricane began forming in the Gulf of Mexico. Overnight, it strengthened into a monster. On the morning of September 29th, just as the funeral was getting underway, the storm slammed into the Louisiana coast. What followed was chaos. Winds over 100 mph ripped through the swamp. The waters of Lake Pontchartrain surged inland. Trees snapped like twigs. Homes were torn apart. The town of Frenier, along with nearby communities like Rudock and Napton, was destroyed, flattened, washed away. Hundreds of people died. Entire buildings vanished into the flood. Train tracks were twisted and drowned. Survivors later said the sky went black in the middle of the day. One haunting story claims Julia's coffin was seen floating through the floodwaters, carried on the current, like a final curse made real. After the storm, nothing was ever the same. Frenier never rebuilt. The trains stopped running, the houses were gone, the people who survived moved away, and the land began to sink back into the swamp. The town disappeared from maps, but not from memory. And that's when the story started. People began hearing things, whispers in the trees, singing that didn't seem to come from anywhere, humming low and eerie. Sometimes right before a storm, the same melody over and over. "One day I'm going to die, and I'm going to take the whole town with me." Nobody can prove Julia ever said that line, but it shows up again and again in the retellings. It's part of local folklore now, embedded in the way people talk about that place. So, what do we actually know? We know Frenier was a real town, a railroad hub for swamp agriculture, particularly cabbage farming and logging. It had homes, a community, a way of life. And we know Julia Brown was real too. Her name appears in census records. Her death was recorded in 1915, and the hurricane, that was no legend. It's known today as the New Orleans hurricane of 1915, one of the deadliest storms in Louisiana.